Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Historical Humans podcast. My name is Justin Woods, and I'm joined today by my fellow co-host Colum Coleman. And on today's episode, we are going off to Europe. We're talking about the political systems of Europe in the mid 18th century. Is there nothing greater?
Yes. This is definitely one of the deep dives here. What we were talking about is famously known as the Diplomatic Revolution of 1756. And what is basically going to happen here is about the equivalent of the United States and China forming an alliance to declare war on NATO.
They're just
It's
playing
about what
musical.
we are watching.
They're just playing musical chairs of alliances. They just
Yeah.
basically look at each other and go, "Hey, I think your wife is prettier. You know, your wife isn't so bad. Maybe we should just."
Here's the thing. Most of the alliances, at least the main ones we are going to be seeing here, have persisted for at least a century at this point. So it is one of those things where it's like you take this, ally that you've had for the last, 80 years, and you suddenly say, you know what? I'm going to make friends with your worst enemy and go to war with you. And everyone does this. Every nation on the continent just does this.
Well, one, every single country in Europe is like planning and conniving against each other. They're trying to get that one up, especially when we talk about some of the dynastic rulers of the time who tend to do that kind of thing quite regularly. And the fact that, maybe the alliances weren't quite serving their purposes anymore. Maybe you gotta reuse, recycle, start over, burn it
You
all
know,
to the ground.
the best person, I don't even know who he's angry at because he's not said anything that would eliminate any ruler of Europe.
Exactly.
Personally, my favorite money is on Louis XV, who had a separate, like, secret service cabal of diplomats who would do his bidding, often when that was against the stated policy of the French ministry. He was basically Assassin's Creeding his way through politics.
Look, I did a short that covered the secret Treaty of Dover.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Oh, we're not going to get anything nearly that nice in this. That's no one is going to be anywhere near that nice.
You mean war with Sweden is nice? I like it.
Yeah, no, there's a lot more conniving. But anyway, let's look at the system and let's meet the players
Oh
here.
no.
All right. So the game today is Europe of 1756. Now, at this time, there's a system of alliances that governs foreign policy among all the powers of Europe. The purpose of these alliances was to create a sort of balance among European nations, with the goal being that the total combined military strength of each alliance is sort of seen as equal. The idea being that, no one wants to start a massive land war on the entire continent.
Or
And
so they thought.
yeah, and the premise of this is the rational deterrence. You might, France might be stronger than Britain, but France is not going to declare war on Britain if it knows that as soon as it does so, Austria will invade France. And the idea is this parity. As long as everyone's equal, we have nothing to worry about. Except this is exactly how you start a massive land war in Europe once that first domino falls. Yeah. These alliances will bring all the distant nations into the wars of their allies. We start off with 4 nations. By the end of this, I believe we get to 9. Just in the mosh pit, going at each other here. But
why is it every time I look around it's you three?
yeah, these 4 fools. At the time, Europe is divided between what is known as the Bourbon and the Habsburg camps. The Bourbons were the ruling dynasty of France. They are the French. They are very famously Louis the 14th, Louis the 15th. They kind of come down with the revolution at the end of it all. This is these guys. about 40 years before the fall.
Okay, so no, that's not a great boat for them, if we're
Yeah.
being honest.
Yep.
That
On the yep, yep. On the other side of things, we have the Habsburgs. This is the ruling dynasty of Austria. Um, the where the French have traditionally controlled a lot of policy in Western Europe. Austria obtains by controlling policy in the German-speaking part of Europe. So this is very much Central Europe. This is the Holy Roman Empire. This is Austria-Hungary. You might remember them from World War One. That will be these guys.
also, I just there's so many things I've learned about the Habsburgs in the past like week, and it's been a whirlwind. Like I didn't
Like their
realize.
stunning chin structure.
Well, I should have realized, but I guess I didn't quite understand that Archduke Franz Ferdinand was a Habsburg.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. Yep.
but then I also found out that two of their descendants are still are around and very active. One of which is a foreign minister to the papal state, and he has one of the funniest Twitter accounts because people will be ragging on the Habsburgs and he'll just chime in. Like someone posted a picture of who's the one Habsburg regent queen, Mary?
I don't know. There's Maria Theresa.
Maria Theresa, that's the one.
Who is currently ruling the Habsburgs at the time of this revolution.
Okay, so her palace, someone sent him a picture and was like, "Oh, I'm at your family's summer estate." He's like, "Yeah, I don't get invited back very often." And then the other one's a race car driver. Both rocking the Habsburg name, saying that they don't follow the family traditions anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. No. No, they do not.
Which we've also done a full-length video on the Habsburgs, which, if you're interested, you should check out on our YouTube channel here.
I know we did a full-length one on the Prussians. Did we do one on the Habsburgs too?
We did an explains on the Habsburgs.
Ah, yes, that explains. Yes, that's right. We did
It
a
does
podcast. We did a podcast on the Prussians. We did a explains on the Habsburgs. Everything's making sense now. But yes, in Europe, the traditional alliances are Britain and Austria for Team Habsburg. Britain supports Austria because Britain dislikes France. The 100 Years' War will never end. According to the British, they will never let that go at this point in history. And, Austria is the strongest non-French state in Europe. They're the only state that, has attained such massive size and reputation as to be considered France's equal.
Wow, so what you're saying is Spain and Portugal fell off by this point.
Spain is in Camp Bourbon, and the Portuguese are competing with the English, so they don't get along either. Fun fact, you did just happen to name two of the extra nations that are going to get added in by the end of this.
Go!
Because guess who also hate each other? The Spanish and the Portuguese.
Well, if you just threw Russia in, then you'd have the perfect cabal.
Russia's in. We are. You know they're coming in. Russia's coming in.
Why
Everyone's
is it
coming in.
European politics always involves those hitters every single time? You don't hear Luxembourg going to war.
Well, we have two nations that don't exist that get into this as well: Saxony and Hanover, both of which don't exist anymore. Also, the Swedes get involved for some reason. Don't ask me why.
The Swedes like to tip their water into European politics, but then quickly back the hell out. They're like, we are mysterious and powerful, but we're not gonna bother.
I think it's about the time that we have the Carolingians over in Sweden, so rapidly modernizing army and a 15-year-old boy who can't lose a battle. Yeah, fun times for everyone. Austria supports Britain back in the Habsburg camp because France is Austria's biggest rival in European politics. and Britain is the traditional enemy of France. So let sort of let the French be distracted with the British, and we can do our own thing.
Fair.
Um, However, the Bourbons are not sitting idly by because for the Bourbon camp here, it is Prussia and France. These are the traditional allies. They are buddy buddy. Now, Prussia supports the French because Prussia is competing with Austria for control of the German speaking world, which at this time is a loosely defined thing as Germany, which includes more or less the entirety of the Holy Roman Empire, Prussia, half of Poland, and everything the Austria Hungarians ever owned.
So quite a bit. The majority of Eastern Europe at this point.
Yeah, it is. It is Central and Eastern Europe, with the exclusion of anything that is Slavic or Balkan.
Jeez.
Um,
Everything the light touches is German. Oh no, that I
that
guess.
yeah, you very easily see coming out of these alliances why Germany going into the 20th century is a hyper militarized state with a aggressive sense of ownership over other countries. Like it is this really messed up mentality that grows out of this fight. But yeah, they're competing for control with Austria for this German speaking world. France is Austria's biggest rival. It makes sense to ally yourself with the heavy hitter on the other side of the line.
the the enemy
Yeah.
of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, France likes this arrangement too. They support Prussia against Austria because Austria exists between Prussia and France. And so they have the Austrians flanked. If Austria commits to a war with one, the other should have a fairly easy time invading from the other side of the country. It's a two front war no matter what Austria does.
So
And
effectively insulates and protects both of them.
yeah, it definitely makes it easier for both nations to have a solid foreign policy. They have a bit of a freer hand to look elsewhere. And, Austria's just kind of got to suck it up and fight both of them if it wants anything. Uh, However, the Seven Years' War, which for the European theater is 1756 to 1763, aka the French and Indian War, if you are in, North America,
Yes.
will invert the system. The French and Indian War technically starts 2 years earlier, but seeing as how it's just the colonial Americans and the colonial French shooting each other, neither nation really seems to care. It's only when it spills over into Europe that shit gets real for these guys.
At that point, it was just acting as a proxy where they're like, yes, children, fight it out. Okay.
Yep, yep.
Do as
Which
you wish.
which is Britain is totally okay with doing until the Quebecois start winning.
Well, fuck the Quebecois.
They start winning, and then the British go full ham on everything. But we don't get there just yet, uh, because we need to back things up to just a few years before the 7 years, where we're going to go 8 years back from 1756, from this diplomatic revolution that kicks off the war, to the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle in 1748. Now, this lovely little treaty concludes the War of Austrian Succession between Austria and Prussia. And this peace really begins to start cracking apart the existing system of alliances in Europe. We start seeing discontents forming. We start seeing new players get added to the mix. And both sides start kind of looking to shake up their roster for that, postseason push.
Why do you have to make it a sports reference?
Because if the Greeks and the Olympics taught me anything, is that you can replace warfare with sports.
I mean, for a certain degree, yes, especially as someone who's a fan of hockey. But Oh yeah,
The
they.
Aztecs said, "Why not both?" And I kind of don't want to have that combined. I don't want that combination.
But yeah, they tried to change things up and they tried to shake things up, and honestly, it kind of ended sourly for both the Allies because France, I think, kind of were hoping they'd get a little bit more out of it. They felt a little lackluster, and then the British, being as self important as the British are, were like, "Well, quite clearly, old chap, we wasted our pounds. How dare we invest our money on these wars fought on foreign soils? There clearly needs to be better investment elsewhere."
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what happened because the peace leaves both Britain and France unhappy, and it does so for two key reasons. See, remember how we said that if Austria goes to war with with either Prussia or France, the other has a very open flank to then invade? Well, France is involved in the War of Austrian Succession, and Prussia makes peace without consulting France without including France in the peace treaty, which means Austria technically doesn't have to make peace with France.
Hey.
So France is hella pissed that they got left out of the negotiations and now more or less have to deal with this shit show on their own. The British, which had been funding the war on the Austrian side in terms of just throwing large amounts of cash at the Austrians and telling them, deal with Europe, are angry that Austria technically lost the war. Which, depending on whether or not you're Austria, you both did and didn't. Austria loses territory to Prussia, but manages to assert the ascendancy of Maria Theresa, its empress, as the legitimate ruler of Austria. So, you won and you lost. Unless you're Britain, which says you lost.
Didn't they also, like, not that they lost territory, but didn't they lose an extremely wealthy territory?
Oh, yes, it is. The region is called Silesia. It is very wealthy. It is very valuable. Prussia, under Frederick the Great, takes it as a part of this treaty. And
Wait,
both sides are immediately like, we're going to have to fight over that again, aren't we?
Frederick the Great, is he the one that tried to breed an army of giants?
I don't know. That might have been Napoleon.
No, it was either Frederick or maybe it was a Dutch Frederick or someone similar who had a bunch of
It could have been It could have been Frederick's father, who was also named Frederick. This is Frederick II, who is the Great. I don't know which Frederick did what too much, but this is the one that takes the hyper militarized Prussia and says, "Let's use it against everybody."
Yeah, it was King Frederick William the First.
Yep, so that would be Frederick's father. This is Frederick II.
So his father went around collecting all the tallest men during all of his conquest and forced them to have babies. So I imagine that the soldiers that took that land were the armies of giants. 6'5" soldiers stomping through the countryside.
Yep. Yeah, Frederick II is a little more pragmatic than his father with this. He does a lot of very good formation fighting. He focuses on rapid deployment of large troops.
Yeah, they quite literally are large troops.
Like large numbers. Like he believes in the weight of numbers. As I'm sure the Fredericks discovered, the bigger men have more, shall we say, surface area for the bullets to hit.
Well, don't you know, the taller you are, the harder you fall.
Yeah. Anyway, so both Britain and France are dissatisfied. Austria loses a wealthy territory to Prussia, both of which indicates to both sides that, like, we're going to war again. This is a stopgap measure. This is recess, guys. And the other thing that this war does is it brings Russia into the system of alliances, because it proves that Prussia can take on Austria. The Prussian military proves itself equal to one of the two great land powers of Europe. And as resident power number 3, Russia over here, realizes it just got kicked off the podium, they start to panic.
Hey, that was
Uh,
my medal.
yeah. Um, and they realize that Prussia has designs on Poland, which Russia also has designs on.
Hey, wait,
And
this sounds familiar.
yep. And Poland at this time includes all of what is now like Ukraine and parts of like Belarus and just it's basically what was the Eastern Bloc of the Soviet Union uh, prior to prior to that ever existing. It's just most of the eastern landmass of Europe at this time, and both Prussia and Russia want it, and Russia really doesn't want to share.
Do they ever?
No,
We
in
found
fact,
that out.
yep. In fact, Russia doesn't want to share so badly that they had already formed an alliance with Austria in 1746, which is a defensive pact to protect Russian and Austrian interests in Poland, which is more or less aimed at preventing Prussia from expanding eastward. The idea being that if Prussia attacks Poland or is ever at war with Poland, we will both go to war with Prussia to ensure that Prussia doesn't take anything from Poland and possibly also go to war with Poland and divide it between us.
It's always
We
about
don't know.
dividing Poland. The poor Poles, like, they just, every time an invading power comes in, they go, ah, yes, we can rearrange this area. Oh, yes, there'd be a great room here.
Yep.
We can
Yep.
make this whole field open concept.
We have an entire podcast on Poland and Lithuania.
Yes, we did talk
That
about
is the entire back half of this country's history, and we are starting to get to the point where they start carving it up.
Oh,
It's
jeez.
yeah, I think we have to wait till just about the end of the 7 Years' War for that to start happening. Um, but yeah, so they start this defensive pact, and that's when we start seeing the shift because now suddenly it's Russia and Austria and Britain in the Habsburg camp. Oh no, oh no. The balance has tipped.
Not the Habsburgs again.
Yeah. But of course, both Austria and Prussia are already planning for the next war. And what that means is they're going to massively arm up and start talking to all their old enemies. Yeah, because they both sort of have this idea that like they recognize that their current friends aren't really too happy with them given what happened during this last war.
So they start hitting up their enemies, like ex-boyfriends or ex-girlfriends, like, hey, why, what you doing, old
Yeah.
friend, old buddy,
Yeah.
oh pal?
Yeah. Basically, Austria enters into secret talks with France in an effort to secure their western border for what they view as the coming war with Prussia. They do this because they sense that the British are not going to be willing to fund the next war. The British have been grumbling and complaining about how this war ended and about how we shouldn't have spent money on you. So they're like, yeah, they're not going to back us.
Not to
It's
mention,
bad enough they don't send troops. Now they're not going to support us.
well, not to mention, around this time, the British are dealing with quite a bit of insolence from the colonies. They are acting a fool, especially in the 1750s. Here, this is right around the time of the the stamp tax and a few other notable acts like the Quartering Act.
Yeah. There's yeah, the discontent is starting to rise, but it's nowhere near a boiling point. We got another 20 years for that shit.
No, but the British definitely see the writing in the wall, and especially with the wars they're fighting in Canada too.
Yeah. Yeah, Britain wants to focus on the overseas, so they're really not helping anyone. And Prussia, for its part, feels that it no longer has to ally with France to survive. It feels it no longer has to be this junior partner in the Bourbon camp and like be with the French in order to, live. So they start looking at all the designs that they have on mainland Europe that France won't help them with. Sort of just like how Britain doesn't really want to help Austria with its expansion, France doesn't want to help Prussia expand either. So they start eyeing up what they can get. Namely, they want the British held Hanover as part of the Holy Roman Empire, and they want Saxony and West Prussia, which is currently a part of Poland.
Well, West
So,
Prussia, it's in the name.
yep, yep. Technically, the Prussian Empire begins as what is known as the territory of Eastern Prussia, and then they start systematically conquering every German-speaking house in existence. They will go out of their way to hunt it down.
All I'm saying is Königsberg needs to return.
I'm not getting involved in that. I don't like Russia owning things, but at the same time,
I used its proper name, Königsberg.
at the same time, at the same time, I don't know what to do with it. They gave it to me. Yep. And Prussia knows that Austria will invade if Prussia goes to war anywhere. So they're kind of like, we'd be at war for anytime we want to go to war for new territory. France is going to sit on the sidelines, and Austria is going to invade us, and we can't do that. So they're looking for someone who's willing to help. Enter the 7 Years' War.
Yay!
Yep. Oh yeah, this is the European theater of the French and Indian War because everything has to have 2 names and 9 dates.
Well, especially when you're fighting on 2 different theaters of war halfway across the world from each other.
Technically, it's 3.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. India counts.
Yep. Yep. France and Britain enter into hostilities over control of North America and India in 1754. And as the war escalates, Britain looks for allies in mainland Europe. This is because Britain is deeply concerned about trying to find a power to protect Hanover, which is a German duchy in the Holy Roman Empire. Now, the reason Hanover is so important to the British at this time is that it's the homeland of the British King George II. George II is the second king of the Hanoverian dynasty in Britain. So, to the British, this is more of a point of pride than anything practical. If France or another power were to conquer Hanover, it would be seen as doing something like ripping the crown off of the king's head. It'd be an insult to England. And as you know, the British do not handle insults well at all. So they begin scrambling to find someone to cover their assets in mainland Europe so that they can commit the full might of their navy to all these overseas battles.
Yeah, because
And
that's a large front to be fighting on.
yeah, it is. It gets pretty massive, and Britain gets incredibly pissed off because they do like a round table of all the powers in Europe that aren't France, trying to find anyone that will willingly help them. First, they go to the Austrians, whom they've spent like the last 6 years belittling.
Mm-hmm.
And Austria hesitates to help Britain. They're concerned about retaking Silesia. They don't care about Hanover. They don't want to commit the troops to march to the other end of Germany and protect Hanover. Because, fun fact, Hanover is a territory that more or less borders like Belgium and the Netherlands.
It's like an East German state almost.
Yeah, and like Austria is just Austria's all the way in the southeast here. It's just like they don't really care about Hanover.
It almost sounds like to me that Hungary was a bad ally. They wasted the money, they wasted the troops, they lost the war, they couldn't commit.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Austria more or less tells Britain, if you want to defend that, hire mercenaries.
That's not a great answer to answer to your ally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, seeing as how you're refusing to pay us to fight for you, maybe you should go pay someone to fight for you.
Well,
To
maybe
which the
if you want a war.
yeah, to which the British say, "Great idea," and go to Russia.
Oh no.
Whereupon, in 1755, they managed to sign a treaty with Russia. They will give the Russians 100,000 pounds every year in exchange for the Russians putting 55,000 battle ready troops on the Livonian Lithuanian border, which is the northern border between Russia and Poland. The Now, there is, however, one major problem with this treaty. Britain never tells Russia what the go signal is for deploying these men. Um, they
Also,
tell them that they tell them that's to protect against an invasion in Hanover, and Russia seems to think that it's to protect against a Prussian invasion of Hanover. You know, seeing as how Prussia has been the ally of Britain's sworn enemy with whom Britain is at war for like the last 100 years.
so I did the math on it. 100,000 Great British pounds in 1755 equates to about 28 million modern pounds. So that seems kind of cheap for 55,000 cheap 55,000 soldiers. Granted, they're probably from the far rungs of Siberia, but
Well, here's the thing. That's the price to just station 55,000 men on the border.
that's still
They, but like just they don't
combat
have to be
ready.
deployed. They don't have to be deployed. If they're deployed, the number quintuples, goes to 500,000
Mm.
to deploy them.
But still, that's 100 mil. I mean,
Yeah, it's like you get $28 million a year to sit your army on your own border and do nothing.
or 100 mil if you go to war.
Yeah, yeah. Now Russia, keeps saying this has to be aimed at Prussia, right? Prussia is a known enemy of Britain. Britain's at war with France. Like there's all this stuff. So Russia's good. Russia's good with this until Britain does what they're going to do next.
What, do they betray him? Do they go behind their backs?
According to the Russians, they do. According to the Britons, Russians need to learn how to read.
That's a very British response.
Yep. Because January of 1756, less than a year after they signed this treaty with Russia, Britain holds what is known as the Convention of Westminster, where Prussia formally flips sides. And signs a treaty with Britain guaranteeing British control of Hanover and a mutual defense against foreign influence and invasion of Germany. Now, foreign is defined as not Prussian, and Germany is defined as anywhere where a single citizen has German ancestry.
With Russia having aspirations with Poland, I don't think they're going to be too keen to that.
Yep. Russia is understandably angry. Russia argues that the convention violates its 1755 treaty with Britain. It states that the only enemy that the treaty could be seen as defending against was Prussia. Britain says, no, it could be any enemy. To which Russia more or less withdraws from the treaty.
Damn.
Russia says, "Screw you, we're done."
They're salty. They're hella salty. They're like, "No, we're out. We don't want anything."
Yeah. Empress Elizabeth of Russia is not having any of this.
Well, someone should really do something about those Tsars and Tsarinas.
Yeah. Which allows, ironically enough, this is what allows Louis XV of France to get Russia on his side. Because remember, right now, Russia's with the Austrians. France is with no one. Britain is with the Prussians. And so the French start shaking hands with the Russians over this because Louis XV begins some secret negotiations with Russia, and he uses the Russian indignation at the Convention of Westminster to form an alliance.
Those pesky
Negotiations
Brits.
had, yep, negotiations had stalled in December of 1755. It looked like that Russia was going to reject diplomatic ties with France, and then Britain, more or less, as far as Russia is concerned, betrays them. So suddenly the Russians are very happy to talk to the French. And as a result, Russia pledges to send 80,000 troops in the event of an attack on Prussia. So, more or less, if Prussia is involved in a war with you, we will send 80,000 men to fight them. We have pledged a commitment to send these soldiers to wage war. Hooray.
If the event happens.
Yep.
Instant reinforcements. Yep. Learning about World War I and what led up to it, treaties and nationalism and alliances really played a factor. I can almost see where the groundwork was laid a century and a half prior.
Yeah, it keeps getting worse. We're only talking about the most immediately relevant and successful overtures. There are 40 other treaties that get involved in this time.
Props on them for being diplomatic, but by this point, most of them are related in some way, shape, or form.
Not quite. Got to get to Victoria for that. We are, I think, 3 rulers before Victoria.
Okay, so Vicky irons things out. But even still, didn't the Habsburgs controlled Spain for a while? That branch?
Yep. I think the Bourbons got a hold of it right now.
Oof. Okay.
The Habsburg had Spain for a while. Yeah, basically the Habsburgs and the Bourbons are the oldest ruling houses in Europe right now. And they've been going at it for a while. A lot of proxy wars.
Well, we see which one survived to the modern day.
Yeah. Now, the French, the Bourbons here, they are able to sort of domino their way into some more success here, because now that they have an agreement with Russia and Austria has an agreement with Russia, it's time for France and Austria to have an agreement. That's right, the Habsburgs and the Bourbons are going to work together to fight the British.
I don't blame them. I don't.
Yep. Or if you're Russia and Austria, fight the Prussians. You mean the Prussians, right? No, we mean the British. But you mean the Prussians, right?
No, the British.
It goes like that for the most part. We get the first Treaty of Versailles in May of 1756, which forces the total disarmament of Germany. I'm kidding. No, everything is signed at Versailles. God knows why.
Because
they just won't stop doing it.
It's beautiful. It's a projection of power. It's a projection of French wealth.
It's the king's house.
It's an ego play. It's a power play. You come to my house to sign treaties.
Yep. Anyway, the first Treaty of Versailles is a defensive alliance between France and Austria, where both sides pledge to send 24,000 men in the event of an attack. More or less by anyone. If you are invaded by a foreign power, we will send 24,000 men to assist you.
But what about France and Britain's ongoing conflict?
Yep. Notably, and this is a rare exemption for a lot of these treaties, the ongoing war between France and Britain is excluded from this obligation.
Smart on Austria's part.
Yeah. Only because the Habsburgs are the equal of the Bourbons are they able to get that clause in. Both the French and Austrian negotiators felt pushed into this agreement by the Convention of Westminster. Neither side really wanted to get along. They both both nations kind of hate each other. But they realized that Prussia no longer answers to France. And the British are going to fund the hell out of this hyper-militarized, Germans over here. So, we all need to band together. Uh, Goes pretty well. And honestly, at this point, with all the treaties, all the backstabbing, all the reshuffling of the board that we've talked about here, you might have gotten a little lost. And you might thinking, okay, war is inevitable. Britain and France are fighting a proxy war. It's about to spill over into a real one. Everyone has treaties. Everything is lined up. Dominoes, sparks diffuses. It's all going to happen. But it need not have, because every treaty we've mentioned so far is defensive in nature, meaning that if either party that signs one of these treaties is the aggressor in the war, their allies don't have to do anything. So that means that technically no one has to fight. No one has to get involved. We don't have to kill each other.
So far.
However,
there's the needle.
These treaties have also resulted in both Austria and Russia massing troops near Prussian territory. The Russians have put 80,000 men on the border.
Oh.
And the Austrians, who have been after Silesia for 8 years at this point, are building up in the north, getting ready for the next inevitable war. So, on August 29th, 1756, no one really knows for sure why. He doesn't write it down at all. Frederick the Great doesn't really give a good reason, but it seems most likely that he felt he was backed into the corner, and like the Japanese Navy in 1941, felt that their only move to ensure their survival was a preemptive war. He takes his army, marches through Saxony, and attempts to invade Austrian-held Bohemia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which, of course, prompts the Queen to write the Bohemian Rhapsody.
Mama just killed a man. Put a gun against his head.
Yeah. Yeah. But, yes, they make the move for Bohemia, and this begins the war in Europe. The 7 Years' War begins. Britain, for the most part, is annoyed that it might have to help Prussia on the mainland, because if this goes poorly for Prussia, Britain has obligations due to its treaties and due to the fact that Prussia is the only nation in all of Europe willing to guarantee Hanover's safety.
Yeah, kind of important.
Yeah, Hanover is like that little egg you had to carry around without cracking for those carnival games. That's what Britain is doing while trying to punch France.
They're just in the middle of boxing.
Yeah, they're in a boxing match. They got to balance an egg on a spoon, and that's Hanover.
Whereas Austria and Prussia are just tugging of war at each other.
Yeah. More or less. France, however, is shocked. They are stunned. They're appalled. They hate this. Because France was signing all these treaties so that they didn't have to worry about Prussia doing anything because rational deterrence. And if anyone did anything, they would have, they'd have time to react, time to think about things. They wanted to take all the troops that are on their eastern border and ship them off to go fight Britain overseas. They can't do that now because all their defensive pacts are triggering, and they now owe 30,000 troops to the Austrians because Bohemia has been invaded. You signed a treaty saying if Austria gets invaded, you owe us 30,000 men.
Oh, jeez.
So they just hate this, as France is now forced to support Austria as their ally.
Yeah, when they get pulled into it. A war that they had nothing to do with.
Yeah. And the best part is, it's Austria. 2 years prior, France would have loved this. They'd have been all for it. They'd been like, yes, pick Austria apart. Goodbye.
The ironic part is about 60 years after this, France comes back with a vengeance.
Yep, it's all over.
History is cyclical.
Yeah, it just keeps happening. Anyway, Austria and Russia secure an offensive alliance on February 2nd of 1757, in which both sides pledge 80,000 men to invade Prussia.
So that's
Uh,
160,000 or
yep,
80,000 total.
it's 80,000 from each side.
Wow.
Basically, they both agree to send 80,000 men into Prussia to invade it. Plus, Austria already has that extra like 30,000 from France.
So
So we have close to
190,000.
yep, yeah, we have close to 200,000 men on the march for Prussia.
And that's not even really. Wow.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Poland's sovereignty is being completely disrespected because in order to get to Bohemia, Prussia had to invade a Polish-held territory called Saxony, and in order to get to Prussia, Russia has to invade all of Poland.
Darn. Hate
You
when
will
that
notice
happens.
that in all this time, no one has consulted Poland on anything.
Hate
But
when that
people have been
happens.
signing treaties about armies moving through Poland.
Poland's just sitting there like, hey guys. Guys, I think you
Guys,
forgot about me.
I'm
Guys,
still here.
I want to
Hello.
play. I want to play soldier. Can I play
No,
soldier?
I don't. I really don't. Also, why is Sweden getting bigger on the horizon?
The sun is getting larger and larger and larger.
Yep. And this treaty is particularly vicious. It's one of the few that we're going to talk about the secret clauses of.
Ooh, I love
Because,
secret clauses.
yeah. So all the treaties had secret clauses, which are little things that aren't on the official document, but are on separate documents that are kept with them. Sort of like uh, bonus contingencies. So, for example, in this one, in the event we win the war, here's how we're going to divide up all the territory that is now Prussia and possibly Poland.
There's a little bit of ego and swagger in that too, where it's like, should we win, this is how we'll divide the bounty. All right. I mean, it's good to
Yeah.
do it ahead of time. To be fair, you
Yeah.
you eliminate a lot of infighting and squabbling, but
Yeah, it prevents one side from rushing in and trying to take as much as they can. It allows you to keep a sense of balance, and it gives you a pre-existing justification for when the war ends, you don't reset to pre-war borders, which is the other main tradition of Europe at this time. Of if you win a defensive, if you win, a war, typically you set things back to how they were before the war started. Unless, of course, you have some treaty saying, hey, we all agreed that if we got invaded by you specifically, that you would lose these territories in the event we beat you.
hmm.
That is how their politics work. So all these treaties have contingencies here. But this one I decided to talk about just because the sheer ambition of just assuming you're going to own, you know, basically everything the Soviet Union owns in the end of World War II. Just assuming you're going to get that
I
in the
mean,
1750s. The ego that goes on here.
I mean, Russia always is a fan of overexerting their ambition and their power, and they like to harken back to the good and old days. So, you know, we're talking about this now. The Soviets talked about this as like completion of their own history.
Yep. Yep. So now Russia is actively involved in the war against Prussia alongside Austria. So France is in it, Austria is in it, Prussia's in it, Russia's in it. Um, Now Britain is reluctantly involved, and they're going to get to one more treaty here, which is the Second Treaty of Versailles. This one happened in May of 1757, and it's when Austria formally brings France into the war.
Wait, they still
And
managed to avoid it up into that point?
yep. Yep. News is traveling slow. You have to negotiate independently with your allies for, additional obligations and shit like that. But France formally declares war.
Oh, wow.
And with this, in addition to the 30,000 troops pledged by the first treaty, which, fun fact, it was originally 24,000, but the second treaty amended that to be 30,000. So, in addition to those 30,000 men, France has agreed to send an additional 150,000, bolstering the total amount of troops invading Prussia to 340,000 men.
That's a sizable invasion force.
Yeah. Yeah, they more or less they account for almost half of the invading army. Actually, I think no. Yeah, they account for 180,000 out of 340,000 troops. So that, yeah, they account for more than half because there's only 160,000 between Austria and Russia.
I mean, there is something to be said, and I don't think it gets talked enough a heck of a whole lot, but about having a battle tested and war ready army. So, them going through this and experiencing this may not have been a terrible thing given their experience with England and with the colonies. And
Yeah. Oh, don't get me wrong. This war, which is terrible and devastating and all sorts of things, it does certainly give a much better fighting force for what comes after, which is, of course, America.
Not to mention the French free themselves of their monarch.
Yeah, but they only do that after they see the Americans do that and go, "Hang on, you get to do what now?"
The funny part is they help the Americans.
They help the Americans, and then all the French soldiers go, "Hang on, you guys won the war and you get what? We don't get that." And they go home. "Can we have this?" And Louis XV is no, and they go, "We have the guns." I said no. Okay, bang bang.
No, then you just hear the sliding of the guillotine. You just hear the blade piercing the air. Like,
yeah.
But we have weapons. Okay, and we will use them. And shink.
On you. I don't think the king is very bright. Yeah, poor Louis XV.
But they're getting a lot of combat tested soldiers here, especially at this point, because a lot of even petty soldiers at this point, by the time those wars came around, were captains, sergeants, lieutenants. They climbed the ranks.
Yep. And
30 years is not a long time.
Yeah, no, it is not. And it's about to get a little more hilarious for European politics here.
Oh, God.
So do you remember how you were talking about the Habsburg controlling the throne of Spain earlier with them having that for a long time?
Yeah.
Well, a few decades prior to this, there was something called the War of Spanish Succession.
Okay.
Which saw the Spanish throne flip from Habsburg to Bourbon. Now, the Habsburgs, they remembered this. And so, as part of this treaty, France trades the Spanish territories in Italy back to Austria, which the Bourbons got a hold of when they won the War of Spanish Succession, because it was a part of Spain. They go and tell the Spanish, "Hey, we sold your land. Give it to Austria now." And in return, Austria gives them the Netherlands.
Huh.
The best part is, as far as I could tell, Austria gives them all of the Netherlands, despite only owning about 2/3.
When you give it to a higher power like that, it's not bad. But that's an interesting where they're just literally trading parcels of land. But then also, how do you think those conversations went where it was a Bourbon in control who won a war against the Habsburgs?
Yep.
And you're speaking to a Habsburg that you're trying to ally with, like, hey, I know our allies didn't quite get along, but look, it's not looking great for either of us. Let's try and fix this.
Yeah. Well, I imagine with the trade it was something like this. "My dearest cousin, King of Spain, I've sold off some of your territory to fight a war on the other side of the continent. Please give your mortal enemies these lands. And if you do not, I will cross the Pyrenees and conquer you. Forever your sovereign, Louis of France."
Somewhere in the distance, you hear Basque music chanting.
Oh, the boss don't get nothing right now.
No, but you mentioned that R word, the Revolu. They'll go mad.
Yeah. But yeah, And with this transfer, everyone is fully committed to the war, and that is the diplomatic revolution. Everything that happens after this point is just a massive series of bloodbaths, battles, and people repeatedly attempting to besiege Prague.
Okay, so what? Who won the war?
Who won the war? It's the 7 Years' War. Nobody wins.
Well, I know here, specifically in the United States, the French Indian War. What ended up happening was the secession of a lot of lands that the French held to the British in North America, which was kind of a huge blow to them.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
British ended up losing the colony.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, by the end of the 7 Years' War, which sort of is the kickoff for this diplomatic, what this diplomatic revolution kicks off with, there are multiple treaties, um, getting different parts out of the war. The Treaty of Paris sees Britain, Hanover, France, Spain, and Portugal withdraw from the war. The Treaty of Hubertusburg gets Austria, Prussia, and Saxony out, more or less leaving Russia to go, am I fighting someone? And Sweden to go, maybe.
Sweden always lurking, never in the forefront.
Because they're also involved in this.
And
But
I do also want to
yeah,
highlight too that this war led to a lot of the acts that we mentioned earlier about that the British enacted on the Americans, because the British needed to afford the war. They needed to find a way to finance it, especially because they lost a lot of money with the Hungarians.
yeah, yeah. Now, the Treaty of
Or
Hubertusburg, which is
Austrian, sorry.
the Treaty of Hubertusburg, which is sort of the mainland treaty between all the sort of central people, the German states, all of them. It just says we're going to reset to the pre-war borders. So it's as if 1756 is the year again. No more fighting. Nobody really gets to keep anything. The Treaty of Paris sees a lot of territorial changes in the Americas. You know, transfer around and get more or less get taken. Both to and from. It's like too numerous to go through all the different small islands and just general chunks of land that get switched about. But more or less, no one really wins the war. It's just bloodbath, and everyone agrees to stop.
That explains why there's a lot of hostilities that carry into the 18th century, because after the French Revolution, we see the rise of Napoleon, and Napoleon
Yep.
just goes on a tear across all of Europe. It doesn't matter
Yep.
whether you were an ally or not.
Yeah, but then we see the Central Powers formed, which starts World War One.
And Austria-Hungary takes a lot of the control. Prussia ceases to exist after that, by the way.
Prussia technically becomes Germany.
Yeah, they just...
Prussia succeeds in its lifelong ambition of becoming Germany by kicking out the Holy Roman Empire and founding the German Empire. So Prussia wins. They cease to exist, but they technically won.
Oh my god, they had that nuclear option. And then Russia, like 100 years later, was just like, yeah, we never signed it. We never ended it.
Yep.
I still want my land concessions.
Yep. Yep.
God, I knew this would be bad. I knew this would be a shit show. I just didn't realize to what depths and what lengths this was. And I figured that the flip would have been interesting. I just didn't think it'd be quite like this.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting because I have a little summary here as like a chunk on this. Like, what effectively happens is in 8 years, the entire system of alliances in Europe is inverted. Some of these alliances have been held for over a century. We effectively go from Britain and Austria versus France and Prussia to Britain and Prussia versus France, Austria, and Russia. And then, as the 7 Year War escalates, Portugal joins with Britain and Prussia.
God damn it.
Well, Saxony, which is technically a part of Poland right now, wages war independently on the side of France, Austria, and Russia. And because Portugal's involved, Spain joins on the side of France, and Sweden joins on the side of France because it's Prussia versus everyone. And when you spend 2 generations building the most militarized society in the history of the world, you will not die.
I love how over the course of just a couple of centuries, Europe went from the Renaissance era to the Reformation period to the Enlightenment to large scale colonial empires and holding to rapid militarization, and then this is right on the brink of industrialization,
Yeah.
which
Yeah, we got
blows everything out of the water.
yeah. Yeah, we got 100 years until the Industrial Revolution really starts kicking it up in America, and about half as many, about half as much time before it really goes big in Britain.
Yeah, which is early 18th century or 19th century.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's the
not that
yeah
far
early
off.
early Victorian period is when we start seeing the industrialization of Britain. So that's about 1801.
And then for whatever reason, it all came roaring back to quite a bit. But that's interesting. So this has got to be one of the last major engagements the Habsburgs were in before, obviously, World War One, which we've referenced a dozen times.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they get into the Napoleonic War, because Napoleon just declares war on everyone because he's
Okay, yeah,
Napoleon.
fair.
Um, yeah,
Oh, how does Bismarck fall into this? Because he comes along, I mean, about 60, 80 years later, but
Bismarck, the statesman.
Otto von Bismarck.
Yeah, he's a century after this. This is 1756.
So
Otto
he's
von Bismarck is advising King Wilhelm II in World War One.
okay.
So he's about. Don't get me wrong. He is like head of state for like the German Empire for like 30 years, but like he is early 20th and late 19th century. We are mid 18th century right here. It's easy to skip the
No,
1800s. No one wants to talk about when France ruled everything.
Bismarck died in 1898. So he was born in the Kingdom of Prussia. He was a part of the unification of the German states. That's what I was thinking about. And
There you go. Yeah, no, you got it better than me. That's correct. Yeah.
okay, yeah, because that's what I was
No,
thinking
you are
about.
correct.
Because
Sorry, I pushed him. I pushed him like 30 years back.
like 50. But yeah, so the unification of the German states ended up kind of almost. I would feel like as a result of this, in a lot of weird ways, because you see a lot of the Germanic states kind of going, "Hey, we're not so different after all."
Yeah. So you want to see the list of all the wars? I'm going to exclude the revolutions,
Okay.
but all the wars that Austria gets involved in between now and World War One, just for a fun bonus at the end here.
All right. Yes.
All right, War of Bavarian Succession, Kettle War, Austro-Turkish War, War of the First Coalition, War of the Second Coalition, War of the Third Coalition. Fun fact: the coalition wars are the Napoleons.
Ah. Because they
Yeah.
had to form coalitions to fight him
Yep, yep, yep. It's just
from Austria
it's
to
just
Russia.
Yep, yep. War of the Fifth Coalition. Then they get involved with the French invasion of Russia, the War of the Sixth Coalition, War of the Seventh Coalition, uh, uprising, the expedition against Morocco, the Second Egyptian Ottoman War. We're at 12 now, by the way.
Okay.
The First War of Italian Independence.
Because they tried to break
The-
away.
Yep. The Second French intervention in Mexico, of all things.
That doesn't surprise me with Maximilian,
Yep.
the Emperor of
The-
Mexico.
Yep. The Second Schleswig War. The Austro-Prussian War. The Great Eastern Crisis. The Serbo-Bulgarian War. the Boxer Rebellion in China,
Everyone was
and
involved.
then World War One. So we're at, what was it, 19 or 24? I forget how many times I twisted over. My hand started hurting.
Oh, Austria. You guys were up to no good. But, yep,
Yeah.
that'll be a great point for us to wrap up. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to follow along, and we will see you in the next video.